Hi, I'm Kathy Johnson, and welcome to Town Talk. My guest with me today is Claudia Chadwick. Claudia is a parishioner at Our Lady of Sorrows Traditional Catholic Church, Orange, Connecticut. I want to welcome you, Claudia.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Claudia, this is interesting. A parishioner coming to talk about a church that obviously you love. Are you? Claudia has asked me if she could come on and speak about herself and her church. She doesn't represent the church per se. If you want to explain that.
Yeah, I'm a parishioner. I don't hold any office within the church hierarchy or organization, but I know that public access is a great way to get the word out.
Yes.
Certainly reaching more people than I could with flyers or brochures or,
Right.
personally. So knowing that we had this lovely studio here in Seymour, where I live, I figured I'd take advantage of it.
That's right. It is a beautiful studio. People don't realize they've got state of the art in here. Isn't it gorgeous? It is.
And I've seen the back, a giant studio in the rear, too.
Oh, I haven't been there yet.
You could do a Broadway play in there.
Wow.
It's huge.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I was pleased when you reached out to me in the studio to do a show like this, and this is going to be very interesting. I want you to you begin in your own way of the message you would want to get across.
The name of the church is Our Lady of Sorrows Chapel in Orange, Connecticut on New Haven Avenue. And they have the traditional Latin Mass there.
Oh, I remember that.
And it's unique because there's not that many churches that still do a Latin Mass. There's one in Stepney, Monroe, called Our Lady of the Rosary Chapel, which is another church I've attended, lovely church. And for people who want a more authentic religious experience, Catholics in particular, going back to the way the Mass has been said for 1,500 years, I'm of the opinion if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
And so this is for the kind of person who would appreciate the Catholic Church as it has been for millennium and prior to the Novus Ordo changes. We have a priest at the church, Father Bernard Champagne, who was a Trappist monk at Spencer, Massachusetts for many years. And when he then came out of being cloistered and became a priest, and we're lucky to have him. So I personally, just to backtrack a little, I've had a very varied religious life. My mother raised me nominally Catholic as a child, but then she became very entrenched in the New Age movement. I learned transcendental meditation when I was in my teens, and I attended Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Iowa, where I got a degree in liberal art and fine art. And last thing I ever thought I'd do would be to attend a Catholic church because I was exposed to Eastern religions. I've always been very open to different religions and something of a spiritual seeker, always looking to find a very authentic religious experience where I feel I was really tapping into God and divinity and all that sort of thing. And so quite by accident, I lived in Stratford back in the 80s and 90s, and my daughter, who was just a little child then, 6 years old, was having a little trouble at the public school. And I wasn't fond of the way they were kind of labeling her as, ADD, this D, that D,
Sure.
Asperger's, and they put her into special ed without me knowing it, which I didn't care for. So coincidentally, my mom was working for the hometown papers in this area and was in charge of advertising ads, display ads, and Our Lady of the Rosary Chapel up in Monroe had a little school in their basement with only about 50 children in it. And so I took my daughter out of public school, put her in the traditional Catholic school with nuns who were still wearing the full habit
Oh, sure.
and still teaching with the Baltimore Catechism.
Oh,
and,
yes, I remember those days.
the 3 R's, and no frills, but very, very strict, and heavy, heavy influence on Catholicism. And I said, well, it's better than public school. And here I was, a lapsed Catholic who had been all over the place with Eastern religion, toyed with the idea of becoming a Mormon, toyed with various Pentecostal churches. You name it, I'd done it.
Seeking.
I was a seeker. So I thought, well, let's try this out. And I knew it was the traditional Catholic Church. The first time I went, I walked through the doors and there was incense pouring off the altar. There were about 20 nuns singing Gregorian chants upstairs. This was now the Monroe Church I'm talking about. And there was the bishop in his full regalia, very serious and stern, saying a mass in Latin. And I said, wow, this is certainly Catholic in a way that I didn't even remember, because when I was a child, Novus Ordo came about in the early 60s and the mass was translated into English.
Right.
And I remember the adults back then murmuring about it, saying, well, this should be a good thing, and well, they're changing the position of the altar, and now we'll see the front of the priest, not the back of the priest. And so that kind of lingered in my mind, but I started to learn in the early 90s about why someone would want to attend a church with the Mass being said in Latin. Of course, the missals had Latin on one side and English on the other.
Yes, that was the Pope Pius XII Missal. I remember it. Yes.
And so it was like a crash course in Latin in a way. But I loved the ritual and the beauty of the ritual and the authenticity of it. And I remembered hearing someone say, I wish I could remember who, that right about the time that the Mass was translated out of Latin, droves of people left the Catholic Church and went into Eastern religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, Sufism, you name it.
Yes.
And it was because they craved the ritual.
That's right.
The mystery, the mysticism
of it, yes.
Once they stripped that out of the Catholic Church, people went and searched for it elsewhere. So as I became a regular parishioner, I realized that this was the mysticism that many of us craved.
It hit a nerve with
Here
you.
it is, right here.
Right there.
And being from a background of Italian with very devout Catholic people in it, so this is my roots.
There it is.
My father's family was English and Episcopalian, but I did later found through genealogy that my English relatives were also Catholic. And so I said, well, this is really my roots. This is the Mass that my ancestors hundreds of years ago attended. It's the same Mass, it's virtually the same. And I really felt like a genetic sense memory thing going on, where I'm thinking I'm sharing something that my ancestors also did. And I thought, wow, how many things in our world now remain that from years gone by, decades, centuries.
Exactly. And if you look now, if you see in Rome when Pope Francis does the Mass, it's in Latin. I see it on TV. He does it in Latin in Rome, and yes, I remember those days. I attended a Catholic grammar school. My father was Italian and Catholic, and I remember those years I learned the Baltimore Catechism, and I learned the responses in Latin, and I remember the nuns. So, when the first time you walked into the church, it hit you.
Yeah, it was, pardon the expression, a blast from the past, It was that old-time religion, only in the Catholic sense. And I said, this is cool. I mean, this is, what's more beautiful than a Gregorian chant,
Oh, it's beautiful.
And the thing also that struck me and made a deep impression on me were that you'd see families, big families, 6, 7, 8, 9 kids. And I don't have to draw you a diagram. These people were living their faith. It wasn't like a Catholic church where you walk in and everybody's got 2 kids.
Yeah, yeah.
And I, of course, am referring to the fact that Catholicism has always frowned on birth control,
That's right.
if not outlawed it completely. But, you
Yeah.
know, I thought, well, these people are living their faith.
Right,
We're talking sincerity here
right.
and obedience to their faith and really living, not just paying lip service to it, but living it.
Yeah.
And I had to respect that
Sure.
hugely.
Sure.
And so it was also a joy that they started the church in Orange that I attend now. It's closer to where I live, with Father Bernard Champagne. And now, we're very lucky in Connecticut to have two traditional Catholic churches.
Oh, really?
In some states, there are none.
Oh, I would have believed that. I didn't. This is news to me. I didn't
Yeah.
think there was one Catholic church that did the Mass in Latin.
Yep. There are some churches that are Novus Ordo, but they are allowed by the local diocese to occasionally have a Latin Mass.
A Latin Mass.
But this is Latin all the time.
Wow.
So anyway, I mean, occasionally they will say part of the Mass in English, like a gospel reading will be in English. So they're not saying not reading from the gospel in Latin.
Right, right.
It just really, it was a giant learning experience. And one of the things I learned too is that the history of the Catholic Church is essentially the history of Europe.
Well, yes.
Post the fall of Rome.
Well, yes, that's
and
right.
I said, it became, I learned a lot about European history just by attending the church.
Well, it all intertwined, didn't it? Mm-hmm. It all intertwined. Well, you had the Byzantine East and the Latin West.
Right.
You had, St. Peter. We're not going to be theologians here because we don't want
Right.
to. But I will say, you had St. Peter who went to Rome. You had different churches. What would I say? Different patriarchs or bishops all over the East and around. There were St. Paul. St. Paul found with the Corinthians. So you had St. Peter there and St. Paul going toward the east there. And I got a little mixed up there. I needed to. St. Paul seemed to be converting the Greeks, so to say, or those type of people. So you had St. Peter and Paul, which you hear about all the time. But
Right.
yeah, that's a lot of history there.
Absolutely. And the bishop who has since passed away, Bishop Robert McKenna, would give wonderful sermons, and he would often incorporate European history into his sermons. So, it was a great learning experience. And also the just being around the parishioners and seeing children who were toddlers who would sit quietly through an hour and a half long Mass.
Wow.
I thought, wow, these people really are doing a good job of child rearing, and it's a great environment for my daughter. And she in turn learned a great love for her faith. In fact, I always refer to her in matters of religious doctrine, because she knows a lot more than I, because she was educated by the Dominican Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, who were at the time there. They've since moved to Michigan. But, my hat's off to them. They did a great job of educating her. And, it left an indelible mark, a good one, on her that, she's still very devout. And, but, a lot of people might be wondering, well, why the traditional Latin Mass versus the Novus Ordo one? And
Right.
because Pope Pius V, way back in the 1500s, said, you will never, ever, ever change this. Because I think he had maybe a premonition of some sort or a vision that they were going to change it. And the question being, is the Mass valid, and are the sacraments valid once they've been tampered with? And I don't want to get too controversial here, but it is food for thought, especially since, we're supposed to be following the popes being infallible. Well, Pius V said never change it, yet they did.
Yep.
So I'll leave that to other people to figure out why.
That's right, because we're not going to.
Right.
If we had your priest here, he could shed. Then we would have to do that. We as lay people, I guess, have to be very careful. Yep.
But one thing that struck me too is that when you walk into a traditional Catholic church, you'll see the altar pushed up against the back wall of the church, and when the priest says Mass, he does it with his back towards the
That's
people.
correct.
And I remember hearing people murmur, well, I don't like the priest's back being towards me. And then you'd have to say, well, really, what's happening here? Is the priest giving us a lecture in the Novus Ordo Church, the new church? Is he lecturing us? Is he having a nice chat with us? Or are we worshiping God and really seriously offering the sacrifice of the Mass? I would say that if the church is in a position where the altar is against the wall and the priest's back is to you and you see him raising the host and all that, he's actually doing a religious ritual.
That's right.
Where he is worshiping God. It's not about the parishioners. You are there to witness and participate and pray, but it's not all about you.
But he is doing something very holy, yes.
Right, and his focus is on God and Jesus and offering the Mass as a sacrifice, not having a nice repartee and a little dialogue with the people,
Right, right.
He turns around and addresses the parishioners during his sermon, but the rest of what's going on there is a sacred sacrifice,
You know what came to my mind as you're speaking is it's the difference between sitting on I'm imagining a cold leather sofa with glass tables, or being wrapped in a warm blanket in a cozy room.
Well, I will agree with you that the Catholic religion is a very warm religion.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. When you walk into a traditional Catholic church, they have all the old statuary.
It's beautiful.
They have the communion rail,
Yep.
which sort of signifies that something is happening beyond this rail that's sacred.
That's
It's
right.
not, and of course, the communion is given in the mouth by the priest only,
Right.
the way they did it
Absolutely.
in the 50s and earlier, because it's something that's sacred. It's not it's not just an everyday thing. It's not like passing out hors d'oeuvres, it's
That's right. Well,
it's
now
the body of Christ.
Now I also know now a person's allowed to touch their own host, but not in your church. I've seen the priest gives it. Not allowed to touch it. That's what I mean. There was the spirituality and the closeness and the seriousness
Yeah.
of the there's of a oneness with God, a coming together.
And because the church is set up the way the old churches are, with all the statues of the saints, the stations of the cross, I find as a spiritual seeker the example of the saints to be very inspiring and
Absolutely.
gives an awful lot of hope to a regular person.
Yes.
Like myself. So, I like to see a crucifix in my church. I've been in churches lately where there's not one single solitary religious artifact, item, artwork, sculpture, nothing. And I'm like, how sterile,
That was the word I was trying to
Yeah.
find, sterile. I mean, I'll bring back some, as I said, I was baptized at the Holy Rosary Church, and I learned the Baltimore Catechism. I had the Sisters of Mercy over at my grammar school. I had to learn all the responses. We had our Pope Pius XII Missal, and I remember the Stations of the Cross. I remember the Rosary. Do people bring their rosary beads in?
Yeah. And this is the old pre-John Paul II Rosary.
Yeah.
John Paul II added a few more mysteries.
Yeah.
We stick to the old.
Sure. I used to know the mysteries and how to say them on the rosary. And I think there were 5 or something. I can't remember.
I think John Paul II added the luminous mysteries. I'm not sure. I don't recite it that way, but I liked the fact that the bishop at the Church of Monroe was so uncompromising. Everybody was saying change, and he said, "No, I won't." And also Father Bernard at Our Lady of Sorrows. Not interested in going with the flow of the current church, only interested in remaining true to the faith as it was for 2,000 years. And I admire people who have the courage of their own conviction and are willing to go against popular opinion, against all odds, even if it means they're going to suffer hardship.
Well, I won't put myself up that high, but I can just say, been there, done that, and you have to have a strong, thick skin to get through that. When you do that, yeah. I, you know, I'm tempted to visit because I haven't seen that. And I mean, I remember. Do they still do? I know that I've been at a Catholic funeral recently in the Valley, and they do the bells. But do they do still say mea culpa, mea culpa,
Oh,
mea
absolutely.
maxima culpa?
Yeah, the Confiteor. Yeah.
Yeah,
They
through my
still do.
fault, through my fault, through my most grievous fault.
Absolutely.
They still
yeah.
do that.
We do it, and the priest does it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We both say the Confiteor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then of course they say do they say the Apostles' Creed? Is that what they
Yeah,
say? The
and
Apostles'
the
Creed.
Credo,
Yeah,
and the
yeah, yeah.
everything as it was before.
And the glory.
Yeah.
I'll just do one little thing because the nuns push this into us. Dominos vobiscum et cum spiritu tuo oremus in saecula saeculorum.
Yeah.
Amen.
That brings up another point. The Church in Orange, Our Lady of Sorrows, does what's called a dialogue mass, where we actually, the priest speaks and we respond. Dominus vobiscum, he says, and then we respond out loud.
That's what we
Et
used.
cum spiritu tuo.
That's what we used
From
to
what
have to-
I've learned, we are the only church doing that in Connecticut and probably in most of the United States. So if you want to hear a dialogue mass, it may be your only chance in your life to hear the Roman Rite done with a dialogue mass where the people respond
That's
verbally.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing because, as I was saying the other day, it's easy to have your mind wander if you're not participating in the Mass.
Well,
But if
that's-
you're reading the Missal and you're speaking back and forth,
That
it keeps you very focused.
absolutely.
And from what I understand, even amongst other traditional Catholic churches, that's not done anymore. It really, honest to goodness, may be your last chance in your life to ever hear
To
that.
ever hear that. Yes, because how I learned that was at a certain grade in St. Mary's, I can't remember which grade, the sister said, we're going to learn the responses in Latin. And so we had it on the board and we had to learn the responses. And of course we went to church and then we had to say them back to the priest, like that. So that's how I learned the responses and all. It is a beautiful thing, and it does get you into the atmosphere of connecting with God, connecting with. See, that's what's happening today. You came on the show, and I think this is beautiful, Claudia. We are shunning religion so bad. Without a moral compass or something to keep you, I always felt that if you have to believe in something more than your own self.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
Something more than that. And to realize that what you are believing in, and again, I'm going to do the disclaimer here that we do not have a clergy at the table. This is just two lay people.
Right.
We don't have a clergy here, so I'm not going to say
Right.
something that would not be the dogma or the whatever. But for me as an individual, to know God is to know the spirit within yourself. It is that within you. We're icon. We're an image of God. So when we're connecting with God, does it occur to people that in us, God is in there too, and there's a way to connect with the God? Because when you start thinking that you can do everything all on your own, that you don't. You want to call yourself an atheist? That's fine. You're God's creature. You're a human being. I look at it this way. I feel that God works in different ways in people. That person that believes today they're an atheist might move to another way of thinking. But to think that you're going to be in control of everything and do it yourself. At our age, I think we've learned the hard way that that does not work.
I don't think I can get through a day without realizing how fallible I am.
That's right.
So, God bless those people who think they can go it alone and wing it and be successful and, get through life without that kind of spiritual guidance. But I'm not one of them. So,
I'm supposed to feel bad because I'm an old Christian woman, sometimes. But I mean, I think that it's like anything. There's always something good some good that people do, something good. A faith is founded, Christianity is founded. There's always a human nature that something comes into it that distorts it or makes. If they really understood the faith, if they really understood what being a Christian, it wouldn't be judged so harshly sometimes. I think a lot of people don't really understand it.
Yeah, and this current culture glorifies the individual, and remember from the 70s, if it feels good, do it.
We were on a
how's that working out for everybody?
It's not really. It's a slippery slope. I understand our Constitution has rights to the individual rights, but they're God-given. Life, liberties, pursuit of happiness by your Creator.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, you have individuality, but where has it gotten us? I've always said it this way to people who don't have a belief in, let's say, a higher power or God or whatever. I've always said to them, this is where I'm having a senior moment, and I told you I needed the thing. Well, you take over because I lost my thought.
Okay.
I'll be very honest.
Well, one thing I really, really enjoy about the Catholic religion is that it orders your life. Meaning it makes it orderly. And every year we go through the seasons, the feast days. The color of the priest's vestments correspond to the various holy days. In the summertime he's wearing the green vestments, and then on days when there's a martyr's feast day, he's wearing the bright red vestments.
Oh, yes.
Yesterday it was the feast of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary into heaven. He wore white vestments. And that, at a certain time of year, each Sunday has a significance. You go into the Christmas season, the month before Christmas is Advent. Everything it's orderly, and you revisit each holiday and each feast day, and it just as with some of the pagan religions, the seasons, the weather, the climate, and what's happening all kind of correspond.
Yes,
and I love the fact that the Catholic religion gives you so many tools.
Yes.
Some religions, you've got beautiful music and you've got your inspiring pastor, but we have all the prayers for thousands of years. We have the rosary. We have various devotions, novenas. There's confraternities. There's, you can delve so deeply. You not only have the Bible, which is great. I mean, some religions are strictly Bible-based, and there's an awful lot there. Could keep you busy your entire life studying. But on top of that, the Catholic Church has its own history. The saints, the lives of the saints, brilliant minds, the writings of, like, say, Thomas Aquinas.
Oh, yes.
And the history of the church. I mean, they've been keeping track of everything.
Absolutely.
All those millennia. And so there's the truth as the Bible tells it, which we have. They use the Douay-Rheims version of the Bible, by the way. And then the church history. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on there that...
Yeah.
There's so many tools. What I'm trying to say is that this religion gives you so many tools to attain your spiritual goals.
Well, that's right. And you picked right up on, my thought had come back immediately when you mentioned the seasons and that. What I was going to interject into this is, when people say, that they want to believe in that this is, what their belief is, not believe in God or whatever they want to do or whatever, and that loose moral, do what feels good, the whole thing. I tell them, okay, let's leave God out of it if you don't want to have God. There is a natural order of things. There is a physics of the universe. There's a natural order of events that coincides with the way Earth can exist, the planets do what they do. It coincides with us. We're part of that. We're a piece of that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start moving away from that order of things, you get yourself in some trouble there. Not it's very hard to explain because now you're getting closer to the mysteries. But the thing is, let's just take an example, if you would think of this. When I was growing up, you would say, be careful. You want to marry the right person. You want to be chaste. You want to, something like that. You don't want to run around, Well, there are reasons for that. You disrupt the natural order of things, and you disrupt the natural order of things, and when you do that, you hurt yourself.
Yes.
It comes back to you. And then there are reasons why things were said through the years, and the church teaches that order of things and how to conduct your life, because then you're in sync with God. And when you are, you can handle things that are unforeseen, but you can also have a good life. That was very rocky, but Claudia,
this is why we have the Ten Commandments, because think about them. They're not only to make you a good person spiritually, but it also keeps society a heck of a lot more tidy. I mean, if people were willy-nilly stealing, killing, committing adultery, slandering each other, all the things that are listed in the Ten Commandments says,
right.
No-nos, do not do these things. If there's no code of ethics and no code of behavior, you've got anarchy and pandemonium on your hands, and life would be very unpleasant.
Very unpleasant, and it starts with the individual. Each individual has to come to those terms.
I had that revelation too. I started to realize that commandments weren't just a stern parental figure yelling at you. Commandments were for your own good.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And when people don't obey those commandments, look at the shambles their lives become.
Well, this is the thing, and again we go back to the thing. You aren't in control.
Right.
You can't control everything. And you mentioned something about I remember the St. James version used to be of
King
the Bible,
James,
or
yeah.
King James, yes,
Yeah.
King James.
That's a beautiful version. It's just not. It's more of a Protestant edition,
Yeah,
if you will.
yeah. But yes, the one you mentioned was
Douay-Rheims is the Catholic Bible. It actually has a few extra books, the Book of Maccabees,
Oh yeah.
in which the unpopular topic of hell is mentioned.
Right.
I remember Bishop McKenna, the bishop at the church in Monroe, saying, well, yeah, the people who are not fond of the whole doctrine of there being hell and being condemned, he said they had to take the whole Book of Maccabees out of the Bible to
Not
get around
upset
that.
people. Well, but you see, my mother could read, write, and speak Greek. So my mother could read the Bible in Greek, and she could read some of the Old Greek too. And my mother would tell me, the New Testament was written in Greek.
Yep.
And my mother could read it and say, this interpretation is not quite right. And this is where you get, and I'm not going to criticize anybody else's faith or anything, but those that follow the strict Bible and all, sometimes are not getting the actual meaning, or some of these things cannot be taken the way it has translated into the English. And my mother would explain some things to me, which I won't get into here because then we would be talking too much about other things like that. But she could read it, and a lot was lost by the time it got to a lot of people, as they say, lost in the translation. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
and that was it. But
Yeah.
now, how long is your mass?
Normally about an hour, but if it's a high mass or if there's a special feast, it can go to an hour and a half. We do at Our Lady of Sorrows a beautiful Easter midnight mass. If you've never seen it, it's like nothing else. It's so gorgeous.
The Easter mass.
Where you enter the church, it's complete and total darkness to symbolize Jesus still being in the tomb.
Mm-hmm.
And as the mass progresses, you know how during Lent they used to, I don't know if they still do, cover everything
Yes.
with the purple
Yes.
vestments, purple cloths covering all the
Those
statues.
come off. Yep.
While the church is still dark, they're pulling these off, and then they flip on the lights.
Yeah.
Everything is gold, glorious, beautiful vestments.
The whole thing. Yeah.
It lights up with, you know, everything being golden and glowing and Easter lilies, and, you know, it's just amazing to signify the resurrection.
Yeah.
And it's the only church I've ever gone to where they do such an elaborate and beautiful Easter midnight mass.
Yeah, yeah. As I mentioned to you that I had a Catholic father and a Greek Orthodox mother, so I kind of got to know both churches. And the Greek Orthodox are just about a mirror image of what you described. There's a few little things that the priests of both our faiths could I'm follow Orthodoxy right now, but I'm sure that the higher up in the clergy could correct us on some things, but very close, very close.
Well, the traditional Catholic crowd, also sometimes known as tradcats, have great respect for the Russian and Greek Orthodox churches because they've been untouched and have remained true for thousands of years. So it's, you know, you're like our cousins.
You go into an Orthodox church and it's done the way it was. It's done the way it was. Now, some of the Greek churches in Russia, they're doing half English, half Greek, you know. That came to be. Sometimes my mother would say, well, you know, it should be in the language of the people, but you know what? Whatever. That's another thing. But the actual event has not changed. I mean, it's done in, you know, my mother always told me, though, that the part where you say, Lord have mercy, Kyrie eleison.
We do that in Greek in our church.
And you know it's Greek.
Yes.
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 And the Greek pronounce it Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison. You know, and so my mother used to always be proud and say, well, they have one Greek thing there.
Yeah.
You know your thing, and it's still like that. Our church is all in English now, the one I go to, but you can go to other churches like Greek Orthodox or Russian where they're still doing they don't do the Russian, it's Slavonic or whatever, and the Greeks do the Greek, but.
I had a lot of respect for the Greek population when I learned that for years and years and years, every Greek kid had to go to Greek school.
Oh, my mother had it. That's how she.
Yeah.
Well, of course, her parents came here from Greece, and when they came, they spoke only Greek.
That's wonderful to maintain that. You know.
Yeah.
And I had never heard of that until relatively recently. I was like, wow.
Greek school, yeah. My mother had to go. My husband went to Greek school. Okay? Now, I mean, he probably remembers more Greek than I do. I never did because I grew up in two faiths and I was more with the Catholic for a while, you know. But we're talking, I don't want to come off your topic, but tell me more about your church, though. I mean...
Well, here's something very important. If somebody just wants to come visit, there's things you need to know.
Okay.
Our Sunday Mass is at 9 a.m., New Haven Avenue, Orange. Wish I remember the number, but there's a sign outside.
Right.
It's the only church on New Haven Avenue, which is perpendicular to St. Barbara's.
Oh, really?
So Holy Infant and St. Barbara's is here, and New Haven Avenue is right here. And our church
so you're close to the new St. Barbara's in Orange.
On Racebrook Road in Orange. but there's a dress code.
Oh, yes.
As with the old ways, women are expected to wear skirts below the knee, or modest pants,
Right,
preferably, dresses with sleeves and not low cut.
right.
If a man's coming from work, we understand, but a lot of men wear suits to mass,
Right.
and women are really expected to be wearing a head covering of some
Cover
kind.
your head. I knew
I took the opportunity to get a nice mantilla. And some women wear the lace mantillas
that. Yes.
that women used to wear. Some women wear those, or a scarf, or a hat, but a head covering for women. Modest garb, nothing too revealing. A respectful mode
Right.
of dress.
That's exactly right.
So, don't go in your bikini with a beach drape over you or something,
Well, I remember going to the Greek Orthodox churches. I mean, you were in a skirt. You didn't cross your legs in church. You never did that. You had a head covering. When I was little, in the little church in Ansonia, the men actually sat on one side of the church, and the women on the other. It was a little bit of the Jewish tradition, I guess, But no, yeah. So they still uphold a strong dress code.
Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense because you're there to worship, not to be distracted.
Of things like that. You're there to worship and all. And so if a newcomer walked into your church, now you've given if somebody new just walked in,
They would be okay with that at the church in Orange. The other traditional Catholic church in Monroe really does stick to a very strict dress code and doesn't allow people improperly dressed in. But they do have garments you can put on to cover yourself up.
In other words, like a little cape or a little
but
thing.
if you happen to come in and if you're a woman and you're wearing shorts, nobody's going to make a big deal about it. But it
Sure.
would really be nice to be dressed properly to avoid any embarrassment on anybody's part.
Well, and I would suspect that a first-time person, if they were choosing to come again, would see what everybody looked like
Yep.
and would realize that the next time they came, it would have to be a different thing. I do remember when we would go to mass from grammar school, we had little beanies, we had to put on our head. But if you forgot your beanie, the nun would give you a little piece of tissue with a bobby pin to put on you couldn't go, they
Yeah.
gave you something to put
Yeah.
on your head. But, and you said the mass is at 9?
9 a.m. on Sunday, and then we now have an evening weekday mass, 6 p.m. for people who work.
Oh, that's nice.
Yep.
That's kind of a new thing. Well, that's kind of from in the beginning years ago. They didn't have that, but
Yeah.
when we went. But that's
Yeah.
good. And you have a choir.
We have one of the reasons I'm here is because our numbers have dwindled over the years, and so we don't have a full-fledged choir, but we do have some very talented musicians that play. We have a beautiful organ that was donated, very powerful and lovely organ, and we have a few people that accompany and sing with the organ. And we sing the old hymns from the old hymnals,
the Gloria and and
real traditional.
yeah, Ave Maria, right? Comes in
Yeah.
there, yeah.
And on high holy days, feast days, they'll do processions with the monstrance and
Yes. Oh, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's really a beautiful thing. So I would hope that people listening to this would be interested enough to come and look at it. Those Catholics or those who are looking for a faith, as you said, you were looking for something to connect spiritually, and certainly all those religions you mentioned try to do that, but
why not try something that's I joke, and I don't want I hope no one takes this the wrong way, but as far as religion goes, I don't like something that's lightweight, like a wine cooler, I want
Yeah, I went to church.
something like drinking
I
a
can,
shot of double proof rum. That's
yeah,
I want my religion to be strong, you know. I
yeah,
want to have a real experience,
yep,
you know,
yeah.
a full sensory experience when I
Yes,
go.
yeah, yeah. In other words, I'm supposed to go to church on Sunday. I want only a half hour. I want to come in
Yeah.
and I want to go out.
No,
Yeah,
I want to really be there and feel it and hear
yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah.
and I want it to challenge me. You know, it's so sad to me when people, it seems, want a religion that makes them feel good. Oh, it's all good. One of my least favorite sayings
It's
is
all good.
it's all good. No, it's not all good. I'm going to stand here and tell you it's not all good. And somebody's got to take a stand somewhere in their life and say, no, that's not good. You know,
Right.
it's not all good. I want a
Yeah.
religion that challenges me to be a better person, not
Yeah.
to be happy where I am,
Yeah. Well, see,
wallowing in my sins,
well,
you
yeah,
know.
and then wondering why I have.
Why does my life suck?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why?
you know.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Right.
How do you feel about confession? Was that new to you?
I remember from a childhood, this challenges me the most. I am so challenged by confession. I've had people, tell me that's just good for me. I should do it. I've never enjoyed it, but I do it.
You
It's
do
one
it.
of those toughies that you just kind of wade through. Other people don't have any issues with it. It's not a terrible experience. It's sometimes I really feel like a weight's off my shoulders after confession, but I can't tell. That's probably my least favorite part of the whole
I think
thing.
it would be a lot of people's least favorite.
Yeah.
I know that for a lot of years, my orthodoxy, I'd say to my mother, how come the Greeks don't go? Well, they do, but you have to really feel like you did something. But that was a tradition from the old country where the priest had to travel around. The Greeks today, a lot of the Greek churches, I mean, confession is a regular thing, especially certain times of the year, Lent, Easter coming, things like that, especially certain times for us. So confession, I've noticed in Orthodoxy, is being done more often than it was when I was a little child. But I know the Catholics always, you can't go to communion without.
It's huge because it humbles you. And I've noticed in our society, everybody's got so much pride and so much ego. And everybody's encouraged to have good self-esteem. And I think good self-esteem is important, but not to the point where you feel you're, bulletproof and infallible.
Well, that's what always gets
And
a
pride.
person. And pride, yeah.
The sin of pride.
Yeah, one of the
Yeah.
deadly sins,
Yeah.
and that. So, if you were to, I'm going to give you an opportunity to. We're going to wrap up. We have about 10 more minutes. I want you to say any more important thing about the church. Obviously, you would like to see more people come.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're reaching out for more members. It's a beautiful church inside. It's worth seeing because of the interior beauty of the church.
Yeah. Why don't you say something
Yeah,
about
it's the building is from the 1800s. It's got the arched vaulted ceiling.
that? Yes.
Stained glass windows, not no pictures in the stained glass, just green stained glass, but very beautiful. I don't think it was originally, I think it may have originally been either a Methodist or Episcopal church.
I
but
see.
It's been,
Otherwise, they would have had the.
most recently, before it became Our Lady of Sorrows, it was a Mormon church.
Oh.
So it's got some really nice architectural features. We have an absolutely gigantic crucifix in there that was donated.
Oh.
Very imposing. We have some very old statuary that was, when the Novus Ordo thing happened in the early 60s where the church changed, lots of beautiful statues and architectural embellishments were just heaved into dumpsters.
Oh, no.
Tragic,
Oh.
So a lot of traditional Catholics spend time trying to recover these and bring them back.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of interesting statuary in the church
You have
and in the rectory.
Yeah.
And it's worth it just because it's sort of like a historical tour when you see it,
That,
And it's something that a lot of people, if you're younger than a boomer, you've probably, a baby boomer, you've probably never seen a lot of this
A
stuff.
lot of this stuff.
So it's worth it to know what was going on for 1,000+ years before the change.
Sure.
And here's something that's pretty critical, actually. A lot of people believe, and I'm not forcing this down anyone's throat, but a lot of people believe that the sacraments after the Novus Ordo change in the 60s are not valid. So here's the rub. If the sacraments aren't valid, then it's not a vehicle for salvation. It's just an empty ritual. So some people feel that their actual salvation depends on going to a traditional Catholic church.
Well, here would be the challenge, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't want to. The Pope is the vicar of Christ. The Pope makes these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Pope is what he was supposed to be from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
then the Pope is supposed to be speaking as the vicar of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get around that? That's been how he's been recognized since the time of the church. That's a difficult
Mm-hmm.
theological question that we won't answer
Right.
here. But that's why each pope that comes along, and I know we have Pope Francis now, so and I remember when Pope John came in, there was a lot of issue with some of the changes with him.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know the answer to that. It's rhetorical, really. I just thought I'd throw it out there just to.
Well, it's a subject that's very deep and very controversial, and I'll leave it to the theologians to hash it out.
Yep.
But I invite everybody to come and unravel it for themselves.
Well, that's right, because I will tell you this, the church sounds wonderful. It sounds like something that any of us would want to visit. I'm just picturing, is the Virgin Mary there?
Yeah. In fact, yesterday was the big feast day of the Assumption. So, yeah, we have large statues
Yep,
of both Jesus and Mary at the front of the church.
right.
There's a statue that's kind of shocking to some people of Jesus after he's been flayed, and beaten in the Passion at the
Whoa.
front of the church. I
Well.
think that statue may actually have come from a Mexican origin, maybe not, but those are the churches that usually display that sort of thing. But
Yeah,
some
but it's
it could be a
there.
little gruesome, but
But it's there,
it's
yep.
there, and it focuses on the actual historical facts.
And do they have the Stations of the Cross up?
Yep,
Yeah,
in the chapel. Yep, very
Yeah.
pretty ones, in fact.
yeah.
And it's something, in a world where technology is changing so fast that you may not even know if your cell phone is going to work. The technology of your cell phone, or
Right.
I'm always like, what are we doing? Are we doing CDs, DVDs? We're not doing VCRs, I know that, but what's the latest? Oh, we're sticking everything in a stick into the computer,
I mean, but yeah,
When life is changing that fast, isn't it a comfort to know that there's something that's unchanging and
absolutely. Yes.
unchanging and will always be that way, the traditional way that we were taught.
Yeah, there are too few
centuries
places where
ago.
there's that kind of quiet connection with people, with God. That there's so much to be said for the old ways weren't the wrong ways.
Yeah.
They weren't.
Not everything new is better, right?
No, I hope that people watching our show today will hear you, and it will inspire them to go to Orange, to the church, and just see what it's about. Maybe you'll walk in there and something will just, as it did with you.
Yeah, I said, wow, this is the real deal. You know?
The real deal. Would you like to say something? Oh, is there a website?
Yeah, I think we flashed it up on the screen. It's ourladyofsorrows.info.
ourladyofsorrows.info. Oh, there
Very
it is.
nice. Yep.
Yeah,
Very nice
I'm turning away
website.
from the camera, folks. I'm looking at the monitor, but this isn't a professional show. So what do you want? Well,
Yeah, feel free.
yeah. So
peruse that.
Our Lady of Sorrows, Traditional Catholic Church, Orange.
Correct.
9 o'clock,
Sunday.
Sundays. Please come.
Yep.
And
If you see me there, come up and say hi.
so I'm going to thank you for being my guest, and I'm
Thank
going
you
to
for
tell
this
our
opportunity.
audience to have a wonderful day and a better tomorrow. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.